see everybody. It's 7 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the October 2023 meeting of the Village of Friendship Heights Council. And I'm going to open tonight's meeting by introducing someone who's going to give us a presentation. James Lee is a forecaster and demographic research specialist for the Montgomery County Planning Department. Several weeks ago, I spoke with his department to ask what they know about us specifically in Friendship Heights. What do they know about residents of the village of Friendship Heights? Who are we? Have we changed over time? And are we different than the larger population of Montgomery County? Mr. Lee is here to share the sources of his information and what he learned as he analyzed these data. His slides are shown on the screen to your right, and they are also available on the village website under Government, Village Council Meetings, Upcoming Meetings, and look for Click Here to open the slide deck. These data and others, I hope, will become available over the next few months through the county's urban design study and the results of our own village survey. They can help us plan better and better serve residents of the village. It's my hope that these become a regular part of a quality improvement cycle for village government, helping us to understand how we're doing, how we might do better, and whether the decisions we make about the use of your resources of time and money are well invested. No doubt we will discover things we're doing well and others which could be done differently or better. Knowing both can help us improve. And after Mr. Lee's presentation, I'll recognize council members who may have questions, and after these, I will recognize members of the audience. And I ask council and audience members to address their questions to Mr. Lee through me. And we've scheduled about 45 minutes for this item tonight. I'm not sure whether we'll use it all, but we have that kind of time. So without further ado, Mr. Lee, welcome, and we look forward to your presentation. Thanks for being here.
Okay, let me make sure the mic is on, or is this on?
Yep.
Okay, just a little closer. Okay. First of all, I want to thank the Village Council for inviting me to speak today about Friendship Heights Village, about the demographics and other characteristics of the village. And so for the presentation, what I will mostly do is I'll go over the generally the highlights of the demographics of the village. So as the chairman said, the presentation is online, and I will also have my contact information at the end of the presentation where folks can get in touch with me. So just to provide the structure of the presentation, most of the information will be about the village's population and household characteristics, followed by a smaller section on basically the jobs and the commercial land use of the village. And then I'll close it out, and then we'll have questions afterwards. Next slide, please. Just to start off with, I think everyone here is familiar with the village. This is a land use map of the village, and just something to point out is that the village has over 5 million square foot of space. That is an amazing, huge amount of space for such a small area. Most of it is residential. It's about 3.7 million square feet. About 1.3 million is considered to be commercial, and I won't dwell too much on the land use here. I have a slide at the very end that talks about the commercial land use. For the residential land use, practically the entire, all the land use for residential areas is multi-family, so the high rises that you see out just outside here. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start with the population characteristics, just a little bit of an overview of this, and just to provide some background on the data that I'm gathering. For the population and the household characteristics, most of the, actually all the information is actually from the U.S. Census Bureau, from both the decennial censuses from 2010 and 2020, and then what's called the American Communities Survey, that's also administered by the U.S. Census Bureau. And let's go on to the next slide here. The total population that was reported by the U.S. Census Bureau for 2010 and 2020 shows an increase from about 4,700 to about 5,300, almost 5,400 people. And the layout of the slides in the upcoming part of the presentation, there will be a lot of information where we're comparing an earlier period and the most recent period available for a certain characteristic for the village itself, and then also for Montgomery County, so that folks can see kind of a comparison across time, and then also how the village compares with the county itself. Next slide, please. So I'll go ahead and point out that a lot of the, I guess, interesting, at least to me, differences are actually between the village and Montgomery County. So not so much in terms of the differences between 2010 and in this case, the 2021 data from the American Community Survey, but a lot of the interesting contrasts are actually between the village and the county itself. So in terms of the age distribution, the village has a much higher percentage of residents who are 65 years and over, about 33% in 2021 versus the county as a whole, which is about 16%. So the county itself is aging over time, so more and more people are in the upper age groups. And the village is showing some of this trend. But then one thing that I noticed that was really interesting is that a larger share of village residents that are under 5 years old. So I'm not quite sure what to make of that, but I thought it was somewhat interesting that between the two time periods, 2010 and 2021, it's actually the oldest groups and the youngest groups that increase their a percentage of the age distribution in the village. Next slide, please. And also, one more point about the age structure. This is actually related to the gender distribution, which was not in the previous slide. The gender distribution is actually also quite interesting for the village because it's about almost 60% female, which is actually tied to the age structure of the village. So females tend to live longer than males, so that's part of the reason why. In terms of racial diversity, again, what really stands out is the difference between the village and the county. So the village has, it is, you could say it's less racially diverse, but it has increased its racial diversity over time the last 10 years, especially among the Asian and Hispanic population. In 2021, the white population is still at about 68% in 2021 versus less than 50% for the county. And next slide, please. The percentage of foreign-born residents actually decreased over time from about 37% to 29%, which is a trend that is, different from what the county as a whole is experiencing. The county is growing the number of foreign-born residents, and its share is, slightly growing as well. So, but for the village, the reverse trend was what I found. Next slide, please. Educational attainment. This was another characteristic that where the village really stands out from from Montgomery County as a whole. Montgomery County is known as a very well-educated place. The county as a whole is a very well-educated place. So 60% plus of the residents of the county have at least a bachelor's degree, but the village, in the village, that number where the percentage of residents that have a bachelor's degree or higher, you can see that actually exceeds 80%. So the village itself is actually a much more educated place than when you compare it to the county as a whole. Next slide, please. A little bit about the occupational and employment situation here. So occupation tends to be tied, linked strongly with educational attainment. And what you see here is that those two large blue bars on the left for the village, showing more than 80% of working residents who are in this management, business, science, and arts category for occupation. These tend to be your higher paying jobs. Your managers, your STEM jobs, many of your much higher paying jobs are in that blue category. So the county as a whole, we have a lot of residents who work in that occupational group, but even more so in the village itself. And just to point out on the right, the percentage of residents who are 16 years and over who are employed, slightly lower for the village. That may be related to the age structure. So probably you're accounting for more persons that are retired. And that probably leads to that slightly smaller percentage of people who are employed. And let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. This is motor transportation to work. So this is, how do workers get to work? Do they drive? Do they take transit? Do they walk? Etc. So some interesting notes, again, points of comparison is actually between the village and the county itself. A much larger share of the people of the workers that live in the village take transit. And this is, regardless of the time period. Whereas for county residents as a whole, more than half drive alone, a single person in a vehicle, usually. One interesting item of note, so I know COVID has affected how people work, whether they commute to work, to an office, and you clearly see that trend here. So regardless of whether you're talking about the county as a whole or for village residents, there is clearly an increase in the percentage of workers who say they work at home. So for the village, that was basically a threefold increase in the percentage. And also another item that I want to point out is that the large share of residents or households that don't have a car. Usually in most places that's actually quite a disadvantage, but here, given that we are close to a metro station, we are close to Friendship Heights Metro, many buses that serve both the Maryland side and the DC side. It's, I can imagine it's probably fairly easy to get around, to shop, to work, get to places that you need to go to your doctors, without owning a vehicle. So, and that's actually, probably related to the high usage of public transit for people who work. And with that, I will go ahead and transition over to the household characteristics, which are also data from the U.S. Census Bureau. And so, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, in the decennial census returns, there were 3,000 households in 2010, and that increased to about over 3,200 in 2020. And next slide, please. So this slide shows a little bit of information about what's called housing tenure, so whether you own or rent. So just a little bit of info. I'll start with the right side, actually. The housing stock in the village, as I said, and I think many of you know, it's practically all multifamily. You know, the apartment buildings, the condominium buildings, they're all considered to be multifamily. And what's interesting is that the split is considered to be about 50-50 in terms of whether you're talking about the difference between rental units, apartments, rental units, or you're talking about units that are individually owned, so your condominiums. So that split is actually about half and half. When you compare it to the household data, and let me just let me pull back just right here for a second. The multifamily units information is actually from not from the Census Bureau itself. It's actually from our administrative data that we maintain at Montgomery Planning in our GIS parcel file. But the tenure data on the left is from the U.S. Census Bureau's American Community Survey. What's interesting is that over 60% of the households in the village in 2010 or 2021 say that they rent their homes. So clearly there's a bit of a difference in terms of, well, how many rental units do you have versus the number of households that might be renting. So this might be a situation where someone owns a condo, but they don't live there. They're renting it out. So you may have those types of situations that accounts for this difference. Again, the stark difference in terms of the percentage of households that rent in the village much higher than the county as a whole, partly because many other parts of the county have single-family homes that lowers that percentage for renters. And next slide, please. In terms of household composition, again, a lot of what I find interesting, again, is the difference between the village and the county. So if you look at, I'm looking at the red and the slightly lighter, I think it's more of an orange-red color, the 61% versus 54% in 2010 versus 2021. That's actually the percentage of households in the village that are just people living by themselves. That the next largest group, the 22% and 23% in 2010 and 2021, that's actually married couples with no children under 18. So that could be a few types of situation, but probably for the village, you might be talking about a lot of empty nesters, for example. What's interesting is that the percentage of households who are married couples with children under 18 increased from 6% to 10%. That possibly could be related to the increasing percentage of the under 5 population. So that might be a tie-in to that. But again, the household composition for the village, very much different from the county as a whole, where you have, for the county, you have a lot more of the households who are married couples or single parents with children, with minor children. And that the distribution of the household characteristics in the village actually does affect the average household size. So the village actually has a much smaller average household size than the county as a whole. So again, partly because there are such a large percentage of households that are single people or people living by themselves. And next slide, please. Another highlight, I actually have another slide after this that talks about the distribution of the income, but the village is a very wealthy place, very wealthy, and it has gotten wealthier in the past 10 years. So these numbers are adjusted for inflation, and for the county as a whole, income has been basically flat. For village residents, that's quite an increase of about $25,000 in real dollars. So again, the story here partly is that the village is a very wealthy place. Next slide, please. And you can also see some of the, I would say maybe similarities and then some of the differences between the income distribution for village households and for county households. So I think most people here probably know that Montgomery County as a whole is a very wealthy place. A lot of very wealthy households, not just at a local level, within the Washington, D.C. region, but within the country as a whole. I believe the median income for Montgomery County is probably somewhere in the top 10 or even the top 5 of all counties in the country. So one of the similarities is that village households, county households, both have a large percentage of the households are in the upper income categories, 100,000 plus. What's interesting is also, if you look at the village for the under 25,000 category, that percentage went from 12% to 16% of households that make under $25,000 a year. Not quite sure what to make of, of that statistics or who these people, who lives in these households. But that's a very interesting a data point right there. And I think we'll go ahead and go to the last slide here in the household characteristics. And this slide is about housing cost burden. So HUD defines housing cost burden as, if a household spends at least 30% of its income on housing costs, then it's considered to be cost burden. And what this slide is, this only shows renter households. So generally speaking, about 43% of the renter-occupied households in the village are cost burden. Now, that is a lot of households on a percentage basis, but then when you look at the county as a whole, more than half of the renter occupied households in the county are actually cost burden. So the village is doing a little slightly better in that, by that metric, but still a lot of households who are considered to be cost burden. And I think the last section here, I'll touch on, so it'll be about jobs, and then some information about the commercial land use in the village. Next slide, please. This is actually from a different data source, jobs by industry. So these are jobs that are actually located within the boundaries of the village. So these could be jobs where someone commutes in to work at those jobs. So they may not necessarily be jobs that are taken by village residents. And the information is actually from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so also from the U.S. government. The most recent data that we have is for 2021, showing about 2,700 jobs are located within the village boundaries. And, interestingly and maybe not surprisingly, more than 40% of those jobs are in what's called the healthcare and social assistance category. Yeah, so I don't find it surprising given the demographics of the village. So these are probably jobs for businesses that serve the local community. And next slide, please. And so I had shown the map of the land use towards the beginning of the presentation. So we're kind of coming back to that a little bit to talk about the commercial land use in the village. So as I had mentioned, about 1.3 million square foot of commercial space in the village itself. So most of the commercial space is office space. And in particularly, this is the office space that's out on Wisconsin Avenue and towards Willard Avenue. So in that particular area, about 75%. 9% is categorized as retail, and actually 60% of the space is located at 5500 Wisconsin Avenue. So I think that's the parcel just south of the hotel, the Courtyard by Marriott. And then the other category, so the map shows for the other category, let me back up just a second here. The other category actually includes, most of it is the hotel, the Courtyard by Marriott, and Brighton Gardens, the assisted living facility. So the map shows them as more as retail for the hotel, but and then for Brighton Gardens, it's actually shown as multifamily, but a lot of times, like things like hotels, assisted living, they can be categorized as as other types of land uses. But regardless of how you categorize the hotel, whether you categorize it as an other land use or a retail land use, and whether you categorize Brighton Gardens as more multifamily, as residential rather than commercial, the story is generally the same. You're still seeing the vast amount of your commercial space that is office space. And I think, next slide, and then we'll go to the next slide, please. So just kind of to sum up the presentation, a lot of these points I really have already touched on. So village population compared to the county is much more elderly, more educated, becoming wealthier, wealthy but becoming wealthier over time in terms of income. It's becoming a little more racially diverse over time. The village population has a larger percentage of people who don't have a car and are reliant on transit. And also village households are more likely to be renters and are more likely to be singleton households. Land use, again, mostly multifamily housing uses, residential uses, and a lot of it's office space, probably not a surprise to most folks here. And then the largest, that 40+% of jobs located in the village is part of that healthcare and social assistance industry. And I believe the last slide, again, you can access the presentation online. They will have the links to some of our products in Montgomery Planning's Research and Strategic Division's page, and our QR code, and then you also have my contact information here. And I will stay on the podium here to entertain any questions.
James, thanks very much
Okay.
for your presentation this evening. Let me see whether there are members of the council first who have questions for Mr. Lee. Councilman Schaefer.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I just have one question. I thought I saw a slide that said 63% rent. And
Yes.
I'm wondering if that's units rented or individual or population rent.
Could we go back to that slide? I believe it's somewhere in the, might be slide number 11 or 12. Further, okay, we just passed it. Okay, right there. I'm sorry, please repeat your question about the units.
So you have, is that 63% people or units rented?
It's households. So there's slightly different metrics. So what's on the right, when with the 49%, 51% is the total number of units, according to our GIS parcel file. On the left, that information is households. So, it's almost one-to-one. You might have some housing units that are vacant, so they're not counted as in the statistics on the left. So it's a little bit of I won't say it's I think it's more of a green apples to red apples comparison here. So it's just to kind of give an idea of, well, there are some percentage of households who are renting, but they might be living in a unit that is owned by an individual, but that owner might not be there.
Other members of council, questions? Melanie, and then.
Thank you, James. Do you know off the top of your head, they used to say that Friendship Heights was the largest sort of collection of senior citizens in the county outside Leisure World. Do you know if that's still the case, or maybe you don't know without your data?
I don't know off the top of my head. I am familiar with Leisure World. In terms of like the percentages of like the village that are, I guess, 65 plus and over versus Leisure World. I don't have an exact answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Salt?
I'm interested in the sort of the intersection between the housing cost burdened people, or households rather, and whether there are any of those that might be eligible for what Montgomery County would call affordable housing in a new development that's coming up here, or do these people just spend a high percentage of an already high income? Can you?
The statistics just tells you that this percentage of the households in the village spend 30% or more of their household income on housing costs. And in this case, we're talking about renter-occupied households. So it's gross rent. So it's the cash rent, or if the rent includes like utilities, that's also included in part of that. It doesn't tell you whether those units that people live in are like the moderately priced dwelling units. So Census Bureau doesn't collect that information. And also one thing you have to remember is that this is also sample data. So it's not information on every single household, nor can we map. We don't have access to the information to map those households to MPDUs, even if Census Bureau were collecting that information.
So we really can't conclude anything about that from this.
It's
Right.
not. Yeah, it's limited in terms of what you
Okay.
can say about the housing cost burden.
I have another question about foreign-born. I'm happy to see we have a significant portion of our population. Do you know how many of those are citizens? Do we have anything on that?
We can find out for
Okay.
you.
And being that you've studied this type of issue, do you know, can you hazard a guess why that percentage might have gone down in our neighborhood?
That's a good question. So
'Cause that's a
yeah.
significant decline.
Yeah, I can't speak to the village itself. I actually used to work in immigration at the federal level. And just on a more wider trend, at the federal level, a lot of the, I'll just call it decrease in immigration is related to federal policy, especially during the 2016 to 2020 era. And then COVID also basically shut the door on a lot of immigration due to things like travel restrictions, for example, potential immigrants unable to get a visa to travel. So those speak more to the
Sort of macro.
The macro
like, issues
dynamics.
And not the attractiveness necessarily of our community.
Yeah,
Okay.
you really can't tease out why. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why the foreign-born percentage population may have decreased. It could have been people moved out, people died, people didn't move in. So there could be a lot of reasons. But I will be able to look up the, believe your question about naturalized citizens.
Yeah.
That is something that I could go back and look further into.
Thank you, and appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Other questions from council members? Okay, so let's go to the audience. Please, sorry, Julian?
If I may.
Yes, please.
You mentioned the total number of housing units went up 200 plus, but we haven't had any new construction. All the buildings have the same number of units they did 10 years ago. So what, is it something about vacant units, or what's the difference there?
That's a very good question. So that is one of the things that I initially noticed when I looked at the numbers. So I do recognize that there hasn't been any new construction here. So the question is why the large increase in the number of households. Census Bureau, for their decennial census, they also have information as part of the decennial census. They have information on the number of housing units, and it shows about a 300 increase from 2010 to 2020. So this is why I'm also scratching my head and thinking, okay, what's going on here? After reaching out to the Census Bureau, we don't really have an answer at this point, or at least a satisfactory answer from the Census Bureau. But we, Montgomery Planning did do another project, which was called the Census Count Census Questionnaire Resolution, and it's a way for local jurisdictions to submit corrections in housing units to the Census Bureau. So unfortunately, the process was after the 2020 census. Census Bureau did not come to the local jurisdictions and ask them to verify their counts until after the 2020 census. One interesting thing we found out of this CQR study was we suspect there was an overcount of housing units over by the, it's that block with the Willoughby and the Carlton condominiums. We submitted what we think is the correct number of units to Census Bureau, and we're still waiting for an answer from them. But the overcount that we think occurred was about 300. So my best guess is something happened operationally at the Census Bureau, and unfortunately, some of the probably most of the answers we would like to have for this is covered by Title 13, which protects privacy of individuals.
So it's possible our population count is also
Is-
artificially inflated
is
because it's
also-
based on the housing units, it's too, also, we didn't have any more housing, but we have like 700 more people.
That it's possible. So when you think about population, it could be that increase in the number of housing units, but then it also could be a real part of that could have been a real increase. So it could have been households, having children, for example. So that the population piece is a little bit more muddled than that household piece.
Could the housing count be that maybe they classified Brighton Gardens as housing when it wasn't previously?
Yeah, that's another interesting piece of information that came out of our CQR study. So apparently in 2010, according to the decennial census, there were no group quarters. In 2020, they somehow decided that Brighton Gardens was a group quarters based on the block count data. And the only reason why I was able to figure out that it was Brighton Gardens is because that block has no other residential units. So it's basically this block right here with the village center. So by default, that structure has to be Brighton Gardens. So yeah, it's interesting how Census Bureau, how they count housing units, or what they count as housing units, or what they count as group quarters. But that's a good point. So part of it may have been due to how Brighton Gardens was counted.
Excuse me. Okay, let's go to the audience now. If you'd raise your hand if you want to ask a question. Again, please address your question through me to Mr. Lee. And when recognized, if you'd come to the podium, state your name and address, speak directly into the microphone, and ask your question, please, in the form of a question. And please limit the introduction and background to your questions so we can accommodate as many questions as possible tonight. I'll recognize one question from each audience member at a time. If you have more than one question, I'll come back to you after others have an opportunity to ask their questions. Please ask questions only related to Mr. Lee's presentation. If you venture into other topics, I'll ask you to end your question. When this item on tonight's agenda is completed, we'll revert to the remaining items on tonight's agenda, and those who wish to speak on another topic will have an opportunity to do so. So if you'd raise your hand just so I get an idea of the number of questions there are. Okay, let me go here first and here next. And then Ms. Calavia, third. Yep, we'll go here first. Yes, yours.
Thank you, Mr. Lee, for your very, sorry, no, Mr. Lee. Thank you, James, I'm sorry, for your very, very impressive presentation. Thank you. I was wondering with the foreign-born percentage, which is 29, it's almost 30%. However, that's still quite a substantial number of the community. That's about 1,500 people at least. But the ethnic diversity is going higher. The racial diversity has increased. My question to you is, where can Montgomery County add to this presentation incidents, the comparison of Friendship Heights to the county when it comes to reported hate crimes and hate incidents? Because that was missing here, and we had a very appalling hate incident last year. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and I'm sorry to hear about this hate crime. So, which is, hate crimes are horrible in any circumstances. So, unfortunately, we don't have information on hate crimes. I can look into to see if there are data sources. So perhaps Department of Justice or an equivalent agency at the state or local levels might collect that information. So that's something that I can get back to the council with the response.
Thank you.
Hate incidents. Okay, thank you.
Next. Whoops. Again, your name and address, please.
Thank you. My name is Prem Garg. I'm a resident of Carlton, and I want to start with thank you for the excellent presentation. It's very informative and useful. The question I have is, from the planning perspective and the decision making by the council, what sort of implications you would draw from these findings in terms of priority setting, as well as the resource used by the council from the village resources? What does it mean in terms of the findings which you have presented?
Thank you.
So I'm not quite sure if that question is, just for me or for the council as a whole, but this presentation really was to kind of, just to inform the community about who they are, to tell folks at this meeting and, the village as a whole that, this is what the village looks like. In terms of a planning perspective, one of the things that Montgomery Planning does is we use demographic data to help with our outreach. Anytime there's, like a master planning effort going on in any part of the county, we want to know about the demographics of that particular area. We want to know who we need to reach out to. One thing that it's not part of the presentation, but language use, which in the Census Bureau, the data sometimes is not so great, especially for speakers of many languages that are not outside of like Spanish or French or Arabic, the major languages. But we use this demographic data to inform our outreach efforts, and to so that we know that if we have a community event, people show up, but we may realize, oh, this is not representative of the community, or before meetings beforehand, we know what types of civic groups to reach out to for to help spread the word. Not quite sure that answers your question.
It's probably good enough for right now,
Okay.
since the rest will be discussed at some point by the council. Thanks, Mr. Calabia.
My name is Pino Scalabia, and I live at 5323 Willard Avenue. I was born 88 years ago on the other side of Western Avenue, but I worked for a dozen years in New York City in planning. I even was a lecturer at the Columbia University School of Architecture and Planning, that kind of thing. When I moved here in the mid-90s, having that kind of planning background and interest, I looked up something, and I can't remember where it is, but it showed that the governmental jurisdiction of Friendship Heights had the highest rate of people over 65, the highest number in the whole U.S. of those people. I don't know what the statistics are, except in general here. What I missed, though, is any statistics you might have on health and on disabilities. Even if you moved here in a healthy state, the older you get, the more you tend towards some sort of disability. What I did last week when you had the geographic study of the area, I handed out the executive summary of the U.S. Access Board's access guidelines. Now, basically,
Mr. Calabia,
yes.
would you please, in the interest of time, simply ask the question
Okay.
that you have for Mr. Lee?
Sure.
Thank you.
The access guidelines will apply to all of us as we get older and as we get into wheelchairs or have low vision. And I'm hoping that what you've done and what the Montgomery County did with respect to the recent study reflects some of the access guidelines. Would you know if it did? It only was approved last month, just over a month ago.
So I really can't speak to the access guidelines. But in terms of, I can speak a little bit about data on disability. This is something that we actually could, for a future presentation, provide information on people with disabilities, perhaps health. In a future presentation. Montgomery Planning, my division is actually working on a persons with disabilities profile for the county population that is going to be published in the next month or so. And that's actually helping us to be a little more informed about what the characteristics of the population with disabilities is like in terms of age, gender, many of the same characteristics that you saw today. Right.
Were there any other questions? Anyone else who hasn't spoken or asked a question yet? Okay, one more question then.
Thanks for allowing me a second question. James, I wanted to ask, in terms of the density of Friendship Heights, we've all been aware for a really long time that we are unusually densely populated and packed, a number of households, as you mentioned, for the square footage. What interests me is whether we can have added to this presentation any facts regarding comparing us with Montgomery County when it comes to green space per household. So if we have, I don't know how many units we have in our community here, how much square footage of green space per household in Friendship Heights compared to Montgomery County? That would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. That is certainly something that we can look into. That was not part of the presentation because the county is vast. There are many neighborhoods like Friendship Heights Village, Bethesda, Silver Spring, in terms of density. But then when you compare Friendship Heights with other neighborhoods further out, for example, White Oak or Damascus, many of our neighborhoods further out, I'm not sure if the comparison is quite appropriate because those areas further out have a lot of green space. But certainly this is, thank you for the idea. This is certainly something that we can look into doing a bit of a more comparison, at least with neighborhoods that are similar in terms of density to Friendship Heights.
Well, Mr. Lee, I'd like to thank you very much for the time that you spent preparing the presentation. Talked with you over the last couple of weeks, and I know that you've been hard at work on it. I think there have been a number of interesting questions and potentially some additional data that you might be able to provide at some future date, either through a presentation or perhaps just providing a set of slides that we can then put on our website as well. So again, thank you. And I know you've got a way to go before you get home, and I wish you a safe journey home. Thanks for being here tonight.
Okay. Let me just say thank you to the Friendship Heights Village Council for having me here tonight, and thank you to the audience and the council members for your questions. So, thank you.
Thank you. Going to move us on to the next item on the agenda, which are the chair's announcements. I have a few brief ones. The first is to thank the village staff, Julian and Ann, for the business fair that happened this past Saturday. It was the first one. Unfortunately, the weather didn't cooperate. I'd also like to thank resident Kathleen McGinnis, who first suggested the idea and helped out considerably with it. Second, relative to Page Park, the permit application to the Department of Permitting Services has yet to be submitted by Green Sweep, the company responsible for submitting it. Just a reminder that once the application is submitted, council doesn't expect a completed review for between 30 to 45 days. And any requirements for the permit as specified by the county would then help council determine the next steps forward, which could include additional work and costs associated with that work. And there was a correction to the Page Park update in October's Village News about this. Third, there is a new village bus stop at 4701 Willard Avenue, and I'd like to thank the village manager for his assistance in establishing the new stop in front of Willard Towers. And I'd also like to thank Patrick Voltaire, whom I first met through this particular exercise. Many of you know him already if you take the van. He is the day shift driver. And I'd like to thank him for his persistence and creativity as we work to find a solution once the new owners of 4701 precipitously eliminated all van service for 4701 residents. Fourth, we did have a hearing last week about the pedestrian master plan. No comments have yet been submitted to the county relative to the pedestrian master plan. We will have a presentation at November's council meeting by the chief staff person from the county department about the pedestrian master plan. And so there will be another opportunity actually for input to be provided. The council actually acted much quicker than staff thought they would to approve the pedestrian master plan, but in conversations with staff, they would still find comments helpful, particularly because it doesn't appear likely that Friendship Heights will be the first stop for any pedestrian, more friendly conditions in the county. Lastly, I want to wish my wife a happy birthday. Normally, I would have spent this evening with her, enjoying a nice dinner of her choice somewhere else. So wherever the camera is, happy birthday, love. I'll see you later. So we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is comments from the public to the council. And let me see. Thanks, Jason. Just a reminder, this is an opportunity for those of you in attendance tonight to address the council. It's not meant to be a live conversation between members of the council or the council collectively and those making comments. We're in listening mode only right now. Is there anyone who hasn't signed in that thinks he or she would like to speak? Okay, then I've got the list here. I'll call you in the order in which you have signed in. I respectfully ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, as has been the case in the past. Village staff will manage the timer. You'll hear the first alert sound after 2.5 minutes to let you know that you have 30 seconds more to speak. And at the 3-minute mark, you'll hear another alert. Out of respect for those attending and observing the meeting tonight, and out of respect for the remaining items on the council's agenda tonight, please end your comments at that point. Also, to those attending, please enable all of us to hear comments from those speaking and allow all of us to focus on those who are speaking. Please hold any applause or sounds of derision. If you think you have comments that will run longer than 3 minutes, don't despair. Simply summarize your major points within the 3-minute period tonight. You can submit written comments of any length at any time addressed to the council in handwritten or PDF form. If you submit comments later, please include a heading with your name, address, if relevant, the date of the council meeting at which you spoke or would like to have spoken, and the topic of your comments, and address that material to Jason Goldstein if dropped off in person, or email it to friendshipheightsmd, all one word, .gov. If you have questions for a particular council member, please feel free to ask them following the meeting's adjournment later tonight. And also, 4 members of council now have office hours specifically scheduled once or twice a month. Times and dates for those hours may be found on the village website and on the digital board out front. Please feel free to set up an appointment. Finally, please note that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Your comments tonight will become part of the video record of the meeting, and that video record is posted on the village's website and is available to the public. By coming forward to present your comments, you consent to the recording of them and the use of your image and to others' subsequent access to them on the village website. So let me recognize Ms. Merfendereski.
Good evening, Afsaneh Merfendereski, 4620 North Park. Happy birthday, Mrs. Pastrong, if she's watching. And I did want to thank the chair for organizing this presentation from the county. James's presentation was quite invaluable. Last month, I was here to ask for 2 public apologies from Mayor White. The first one was for the council's own role in the botching up of Page Park, the $850,000 project. Multiple calls from the community to not progress without qualified landscape architects were not heeded, and calls to build consensus before changing the identity of our natural park in this densely populated area were not heeded either. I also asked for a public apology last month for Mayor White, your council, covering up one of your own council members inflicting a hate incident on one of your own residents. As you recall, your council refused to investigate, refused to talk to the victim, refused to talk to the witness, and refused to even review the police report. Now, last month I asked for these 2 public apologies. I'm going to guess they're not coming, and Mayor White, I think it's your choice not to apologize. Is between you and your own higher power, if you do believe in a higher power. However, tonight I'm here to ask for a more concrete request regarding the hate incident. The hate incident came with multiple public statements from this village council that brushed it off. You refused to call it a hate incident. You called it a he said, she said. It was a heated debate. And all those public statements, there was October 22, this time last year, they need to be retracted. The April 2023 candidates' nights, again, multiple public statements. I believe, Mr. Mizi, appallingly, you even joked about it, which I think was very troubling. And Mayor White, you called it a heated debate. It was no big deal. But you know what was a big deal? The biggest change election in 40 years. We voted people out, including the wrongdoer. And I really appreciate the members here who were voted in, who were 30 seconds, who were voted in and spoke up against it. Those public statements, Mayor White, need to be retracted in a public manner. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I'm going to recognize other members of the public before the...
No, it's a point,
I'm sorry.
Point of personal privilege.
No.
She mentioned my name, and I have a right to respond to her.
Excuse me.
Now she's
Excuse
leaving.
me. Yeah. Councilman Mizi, I'd like to ask you to wait until we're through the public comment period. Sally Ann Kriegsman.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the council and Julian and the entire staff here, who are really terrific. I just want to say, many people come up here to complain, and I just want to praise you for the wonderful work that you do for making this a true community. I really appreciate the fact that you're all volunteering your time, and I know how busy you are otherwise, so know that your work here is really helping us. Now, I would like to also ask urgently ask for a speed bump or something else to be placed at the corner of North Park and Willard Avenue. I'm sure this has been mentioned before. It will become totally urgent when someone is killed. But I hope we can prevent that, because the traffic on Willard Avenue, as you all know, people are speeding recklessly, and people making a right turn, are directly in the path of our exiting garage. And there are so many trucks and so many things, and now the village bus, which I also thank you for making possible in a swift manner. I really think this is a dangerous signal. I know other members of the community have asked about it. Can you please try to make this happen? The last thing I want to ask is, I understand the problem with the park that's been held up is the pergola. Is that correct? Okay.
Not here to respond to questions.
If it is, then I wonder why it hasn't been considered to just do away with it and forget all the permits and the expense and everything else. Certainly not essential, and I think you'd spend less time hassling over it with the contractors that you've hired, and make the park available to the community, which has been waiting a whole year for it. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Calavia?
I appeared last week when you heard from the public about the pedestrian master plan. And the pedestrian master plan...
Mr. Calavia, talk directly into the microphone, thanks.
The pedestrian master plan and the complaint, for example, that you brought up, those kinds of things are covered by the standards that were stated in the Access Board's access guidelines. And not just lights, but how long the lights should be on for people. You know, little kids can skip over there, but someone in a wheelchair or a walker take much longer. So those kinds of standards appear in the U.S. Access Board's access guideline. I'd like to give, I gave 3 or 4 copies, and Julian, if you could hand that to the others who didn't. And if anybody wants to see the access guidelines online, just give me your email and I'll send you the guidelines. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cacchetti?
Thanks. First, I want to give a shout out to the village staff for something that's not often raised, but the series of musical performances that take place here in the village center are spectacular. I've attended many of them, and I can't tell you how many times I've paid $200 for a music performance ticket that's not as good as what you can come here and get for free. So they don't get the credit they deserve. It's a fabulous job they do. On the Census Bureau thing, I followed the Census Bureau data on Friendship Heights for a while. I didn't want to ask, I didn't have a question, I had a statement. What the speaker failed to comment on was that for the last 10 years, maybe 8 years, the Census Bureau has recognized Friendship Heights, Maryland as the most densely populated place in the United States. Our population density is about 80,000 people per square mile. That compares with Manhattan's 60,000 people per square mile. So if you see me talking about the issue of population density, it's because if Montgomery County is determined to increase population density around the metro stations, they should declare victory in Friendship Heights and leave us alone. A few other quick points that are on the similar topic. The Friendship Heights Business Alliance has now taken off. For those of you who haven't noticed, we're all enjoying beautification that's better than anything before. I couldn't be happier. Let us not forget, however, that the Business Alliance does not represent people who live here. It represents merchants and businesses who do business here. And I can illustrate easily the difference is if Berkshire Hathaway does what they usually do and make a lot of money and decides to sell Geico land to put up 60-story high wall of apartment buildings down Willard Avenue, if I was a merchant here, I would pop the cork. Best thing that could happen to me. Another 20,000 people coming to my store. If I was living here, my property values go down, my quality of life goes down. So we have a lot in common with the Business Alliance. Beautification programs, activities and stuff like that. Where we don't have a lot in common is in planning. Last thing, if those who haven't followed it, on the same subject, the DC Planning Office is wrapping up its Wisconsin Avenue Development Framework Plan. Comments are due by November 17th. Most of my comments are the same, that DC is determined to increase the population along Wisconsin Avenue from what's now about 20,000 to 50,000. We will get another 10,000 automobiles on the streets if they are successful. We will have crime like we've never seen before. Their development plan lacks a lot, and it has no mention whatsoever of safety or culture. So I thank the council, but I think planning is a very important thing. His presentation tonight was fine, but let's not forget the most densely populated place.
Thank you,
in the
Mr.
United States.
Caccetti. Mr. Dozier?
It's nice to get up and agree with Roger Cressetti, with whom I usually do not agree. I want to thank you for the music that you put up here. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. We enjoy it a lot. And thank you to the staff for that work. I'd like to just talk a little bit about the fiasco that is Page Park. It's hard for me now not to think of when I read in the Village newsletter or elsewhere that the permit application is ready to go in, or it'll go in next week, or when some event has occurred. I think of Charlie Brown and Lucy and the football. And I'm sorry that the council is Charlie Brown in that period now. It's becoming ridiculous. And I have a suggestion for the council. Put a deadline on the contractor. Tell them if they don't submit the permit by a date certain, that you will revoke the contract. You will abrogate the contract, end the contract, and not pay them the additional money that is being withheld. Let them worry about the consequences of that, and find another contractor, maybe somebody who can do the job well, and maybe even look at changing some of the design, getting rid of the pergola if that's the hang-up, or whatever the hang-ups are. You might get fresh eyes. I think that's a worthwhile effort for the council. And on the third thing, this artifact of this village being the densest populated, you can draw a line around parts of Manhattan that would be triple the density here. This is a very small area. So that's a shibboleth. It's the densest population in the country. I'm not sure it's always true. I don't know. Maybe it is, but it's a very small area. It's not a fair comparison.
Thank you. Ms. Bryan?
Hi. Yes, good evening, everyone. I can move that a little bit. There we go. This is my first time attending a council meeting, so quite interesting. I live at Willard Towers, and what I wanted to do is to recognize, as we heard in the presentation tonight, the importance to the village of residents being able to move in a safe manner in modes of transportation that are not vehicles. Being able to safely bike, to walk, to roll, whether it's to get to the metro, whether it's to get to places of business. It is such an important part of life in this village, and I would like to represent the viewpoint of families who have young children. I have 2 young children, one in elementary school and one in preschool. And there are places in this area that are absolutely terrifying to navigate with very small children. I would like to point out that there was a major change that occurred last academic year with elementary school children being rezoned from Somerset Elementary School to Westbrook Elementary School, which means children who wish to walk or bike or scoot or use their bodies to get themselves to school must now cross River Road. And that is a far incredibly dangerous intersection that we have been moving through for the past year. And so what I would like to do is to thank the council incredibly for the comments that you all submitted to the Maryland Department of Transportation on behalf of the River Road Corridor Safety Study. And your request that the County Department of Transportation expand and look at the entire River Road corridor from Little Falls to Western Avenue is so incredibly important for all of the families in the village who have young children. And so thank you for making the effort to put those comments in. What I would love to see is the village become what's known as an 880 city. And that means that it is as safe for 8-year-olds as it is for 80-year-olds, and then everyone in between. That is a goal that I think can be achieved. It has requirement to look at Willard Avenue as well as a major corridor through this area that for many reasons is, again, a source of terrifying, almost waiting to be accidents on a daily basis. And they're not accidents, right? It's a byproduct of the design of Willard Avenue that there are near misses every single day. So thank you all and continue the good work.
Thank you. I think the next speaker's last name is Forster. Anybody here whose last name begins with F? Okay. Oh, just signed up thinking it was a sign-in sheet. Okay. Thanks very much. Okay. So now we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is comments from the council. Councilman Measy, I know that you have a comment to make.
Yes. I've sat here for the last year plus listening to the Mrs. Murfin-Dureski, who decided to run away, attacking the integrity of the council and the mayor and other members of the council. I need to respond finally. I've been on the council for 5 years. During this entire time, she has, on a regular basis, attacked members of the council, attacked other citizens. She's spread rumors. She's lied. She has been unpleasant to people on the council and to anybody else who disagrees with her. She says she's a community activist, and so that's what she's doing. Well, somebody said something nasty to her. Well, that's life. It's too bad. If you don't like people saying nasty things to you, you should stop being a community activist, or you should get over it and go on with your life. The council has no role in investigating whatever the hell she was talking about. It has no role in going through all of that process. As the mayor said and others have said, two people had a difficult conversation, and perhaps something was said that shouldn't have been said. It's not a hate crime. It's not anything of that sort. She decided to classify it as that. Great. We're done. I'm tired of hearing her say the crap that she's been saying to us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, man.
And I wish you'd have recognized me earlier so I could have said that to her.
Thank you, man.
But she does review the tapes, so I'm sure we'll have a long email about this later on, about what I've just said. I do have another question, though, on a different topic, if I may.
Sure.
I've been traveling, so last I had heard about the bus stop at the Willard Towers, which which I'm certainly in favor of, was that the bus could not get under the portico. And then I lost track of what the conversation was. Has the bus been lowered, the portico raised, or what's occurred?
Village manager, would you like to respond?
Literally, the bus has been lowered. The bus has a kneeling function, a hydraulic kneeling function, which it deploys from time to time. It just sinks in place. So that allowed it to go under the Willard Towers overhang. And when the chairman mentioned Patrick Voltaire, he actually had that idea. The first test that we did, the bus just barely did not make it under the overhang in its regular position. But Patrick said, let's try kneeling and moving forward, and that worked. So that's the operation they're doing every time to go under the overhang.
Thanks.
I would also mention, Councilman Measy, that like other buildings in the village, sometimes the driveway in front of 4701 is blocked by one kind of vehicle or another. And in that case, the van backs into as it does. Yep, thanks very much. And Councilman Measy, I'd like to thank you for the comments that you made, which represent your perspective on Ms. Murphy-Doreski's comments to us this evening. Other council members who wish to make a statement or a comment? Councilman Schaefer.
Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge the role of the chairman in getting that additional bus stop implemented. He was the one that really pushed the owner and organized and got a lot of the parties together, and you know, he left himself out of the list of people to thank, but he's part of it. And I'd also like to say happy birthday to Penelope, and thank her for her understanding that we need Bobby here at this meeting tonight.
Thank you very much.
And I just want to comment very briefly on what Dan said about the park. The stop work order was issued, I think, in March of 2023. So any conversation about who should have gotten the permit or if somebody got bad information, that ended in March, because they knew at that point we needed a permit. It's been 7 months, and at some point we do really have to consider cutting our losses and moving on, because if I was trying to do the math with the scheduling, we're not going to be open in the spring, this park. At this point, even best case scenario, I think we're looking at the summer. And the worst case scenario, we have no idea. So maybe next month, if there's no permit filed, that's something we need to talk about. Thank you.
Councilman Schaefer. Any other members of council that wish to make any comments? Councilman Measy.
I'll say something about the park as well. I too agree with Dan, although I don't always do that. He's right, and it's been now, by my calculations, 7 months since the stop work order went up, and from my perspective, there's no excuse for the contractor not to have gotten his stuff into the council. We do have to wait a bit more, but I'm very close to your suggestion, Dan.
Thanks very much. Any other members of council who wish to make a comment? Then, Mayor White, let me recognize you for announcements.
The Council Finance Committee will meet on Tuesday, October 17 at 3 p.m. in the Village Center. The meeting is open to the public. It will include a preliminary discussion on the FY 2025 village budget and other financial matters. The Council's Public Safety Committee will host a public safety town hall at the Village Center on Thursday, October 19 at 6:30 p.m. Residents are invited to attend and voice their concerns regarding public safety in the village. The event will be live streamed and the recording will be posted on the village website. The shredding truck returns to the village on Saturday, October 28 from 10 a.m. to noon. Residents are invited to use this service. Please join us for our annual Fall Festival on Saturday, October 28 from 1 to 2:30 p.m. in Humphrey Park outside the Village Center, featuring food, live music, and fun activities for kids. The County Planning Department will host 2 open house community engagement events as part of the Friendship Heights Urban Design Study. The first event will be Tuesday, October 24, from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. at the Wisconsin Place Recreation Center. The second event will be Monday, October 30, from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. at the Village Center. No appointment is necessary. You can drop in to either event to talk to planning department staff, ask questions, and share your thoughts. Our annual holiday craft fair will be held at the Village Center on Friday, November 3 and Saturday, November 4, featuring a wide variety of artisan crafts. Giant Pharmacy will hold a COVID vaccine clinic at the Village Center on Thursday, November 9, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Registration begins October 20 or on our website. Sorry. That's it.
Thank you, Mayor White. That moves us on to the approval of minutes. We have 2 sets, and let me turn this over to Secretary Salt.
I distributed a very slightly modified set of minutes for September 11th, and I move that the council adopt those.
Councilwoman Salt has moved the adoption of the September 11th council meeting minutes in the revised version. Is there support for that? Councilwoman Durbin supports. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, same sign. The motion carries 6-0. Councilwoman Salt?
Also propose adopting the minutes from the Communications Committee meeting of September 18th.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Motion.
There's been a motion to adopt the September 18th Council Communications Committee meeting. Is there support for that? Councilwoman Tyler? Okay. Is there any discussion about those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, same sign. The motion carries 6-0. We'll move on to the treasurer's report. Councilman Schaefer.
Okay, so as the mayor mentioned, we are having the first finance committee meeting of the term tomorrow at 3 o'clock. It is an open meeting, but by open, I'd also like people to, and this depends somewhat on how many people show up, but I'd like people to be able to ask questions, to make comments, as long as they're related to the topics that we're discussing. It's not another council meeting. There's a couple of administrative items I think we'll get out of the way quickly. And then there are really 3 main items. One is the budget process for next year. We're not voting on any budget items. We're really just going to discuss the process because it's my, and I haven't been through this process before, but it's my understanding that typically we look at last year's expenses, we had an inflation factor, and that's our budget. And we really can't afford to do that because, as I mentioned last month, we're probably going to be somewhere around break even. So my goal is to come up with a process where we look at each line item, we justify it. If we need to add items, we do that also. It's not just an exercise in slashing everything. And that's what how we're going to discuss it. And just to give some overview of the budget, our salaries and related costs are around 40%, maybe a little more. The shuttle at $535,000 is about 20%, and our third expense is the security contract, which is about 7-8%. So those 3 expenses are about 60% of our budget. The second item we're going to talk about is a travel policy. We don't have one right now, and I think it's pretty obvious why we need one. And I wrote a travel policy. It's very bare bones, but it does attempt to put some limits and some guidelines. It's been distributed to the village manager and assistant and finance committee members, so they've had it about a week. And my goal is to come out with a policy that we can recommend to the full council at November to be voted on. And the third item we're going to discuss, and it'd probably be the last item if that's why you want to show up, is the shuttle. And again, we're not taking any votes on it, but the contract is up the end of next fiscal year. It takes a long time to come up with an alternative to negotiate a contract. So I really just want to talk about the cost. As I mentioned, it's $535,000. There's an escalation next year. We don't know what it might be the year after that. So I want to, hopefully we'll find a way to provide a service that meets everyone's needs and at the lowest cost possible. Otherwise, it's really going to just start getting out of control. As far as if you can't make the meeting, I will mention I have office hours. I have 4 hours a month. I have hours by appointment. So if you can't make the meeting and you want to meet with me to discuss anything financial, please take advantage of that. Thank you.
Yes, Councilwoman Durbin. Thank you, Councilman Schaefer.
I have this on now. I just have a comment on the balance sheet, our balance sheet that we receive every meeting. Under the item called equity, there's the Reserve Rothstein Scholarship. This has been on the balance sheet for as long as I can remember, and I'm serving my 5th term. According to the staff, this apparently emerged as a gesture to help Friendship Heights students way back in the day, but the students were children of parents who were fairly well off, so it just kind of foundered. Also, according to the staff, it's been problematic for years and it's been ignored. It strikes me as something we should eliminate from the balance sheet, so I'm delighted that you're having this meeting tomorrow. In this connection, I'd like to request that at your meeting, you consider deleting this item.
Thank you, Councilwoman Durbin. That moves us on to the village manager's report.
Just very briefly, one item for me is that Jason and I recently attended the ICMA conference in Austin, Texas. ICMA is the International City Management Association. It's basically the professional organization for local government managers. And we came away with a couple of good ideas, one of which we're following up on is an enhancement to the village website to make it easier to find things on the website directly. It's basically an enhanced search function, and it also doubles as kind of a tool for folks to also reach out to us with specific questions in addition to just looking for things on the website. So we're following up on that and a couple of other ideas from that conference. I'll turn it over to Jason for an update on the battery recycling program.
Thanks. Just to follow up on the last council meeting where the council instructed the managers to research battery recycling options. And we found an excellent one that Tacoma Park and North Chevy Chase are currently using. It's called Call to Recycle. And the pricing is anywhere between $55 to $135 for different size boxes. And we recommend starting with the smaller one to see how the program works. And it's very easy. It's all done through FedEx. We just contact FedEx. They come and pick up the box. So we're recommending to the council that we move forward with starting that program, and we'll keep you updated accordingly.
Thank you. Anything else from the managers? Nope. Okay, great. That moves us on to committee reports. The first item there is a report of the Community Advisory Committee meeting of October 5th. Mr. Butcher is not here tonight. You've got a report in the packet, so there's no presentation. That takes us to the report of the Council Communications Committee meeting of September 18th. Councilwoman Salt.
Thank you. At our meeting, we talked about two things. Most of the time was spent on questions we wanted included in the survey that you will be talking about later. and also discussion of the concept of office hours and the availability, usefulness, and what other jurisdictions are using that.
Thank you very much. That takes us to old business. The first is an update on the village's draft quality of life survey. Thank you all, members of the council, for suggestions about the survey. Thanks to the Community Advisory Committee for its comments. Thank you to the village manager and staff for their comments as well. And thank you to the two representatives from the George Washington University's Trachtenberg School who did a lot of the heavy lifting to create a draft of the survey. That draft has now, through the assistant village management, moved on to Qualtrics. This is the company that with whom the village has a contract for surveys like this. It is the company that helped the village staff with the Red House survey. So where there has been communication with them, we'll wait to see what their deadlines are for producing a draft that's in their format. And I've asked Councilwoman Solt and the village manager and assistant village manager to work with me as that new draft of the survey comes in. I am receiving still suggestions from council members. As late as today, I received one, and so far been able to accommodate the suggestions that have been made, and I'm not anticipating that we won't be able to accommodate the suggestions that have been made. We're still shooting for a deadline of being able to field this survey in the next couple of weeks and have results back perhaps sometime in December. We'll wait to see what Qualtrics has to say. We've got a discussion and vote on the Ad Hoc Council Committee on Development. Let me turn to Mayor White for that.
For the Ad Hoc Council Committee on Development, I am proposing that Bobby Pastrunk serve as chair, and the other council members will be Cheryl Tyler and Michael Measy, and all three have agreed to serve on this committee. So I would make that in the form of a motion.
Thank you. That's a motion to appoint council members Pastrunk, Tyler, and Measy to the Ad Hoc Council Committee on Development. Is there support for that? Councilman Schaefer, thank you very much. Is there discussion? Councilwoman Solt.
I'm happy we're doing something on development, and I'm going to vote for this proposal, but I'm not voting for it because I think the three people named are the only people that know anything about development. I really believe our committees should have strong community input. There are lots of people in the community that know about development. I very much hope, wish, and expect that you will use that and call on that expertise and cast a wide net for input.
Thanks very much. Councilwoman Durbin.
Yes, I'm wondering if there's a definition for development for this committee. What exactly is the committee expected to address?
Mayor White, do you want to talk about that? Or I can help you if you
I anticipate that the committee will create its mission and add further definitions and guidelines to their work.
So,
Councilwoman Durbin.
So we have, there was no concept of what development is when this committee was proposed. Is that what I understand? That the committee will define itself?
One second. Are you done with your question?
Yes.
Okay, Councilman
Yeah.
Measy.
I think the idea, Paul, as far as I'm concerned, and Bobby and I have talked about this before, is that there are things will be going on in the area in regard to Geico, in regard to the planning process that's going on in the county, the possibility of a new sector plan. And it seems reasonable for the council to to develop some of its own expertise on these things. Not my favorite word, but to have proactively get involved in these sorts of things so that we at least have a position or an understanding when these issues come up. And I think that's the mission of the body as I see it.
Thank you. Councilwoman Tyler?
If I may paraphrase, so this is development from external sources that's coming into the village, but not anything that would be, say, proposed by us.
I think that's
Councilwoman Tyler.
If I can share some of Paulo's concerns. As an ad hoc committee, in typical process is that you have some stipulations such as timeframes and objectives and goals. And I think based on what Mayor Melanie has stated, she's giving that authority, if you use that word, in a light manner, that the ad hoc committee, once they get together, can start putting some of that structure, which is typically stated in ad hoc committees, but can suggest what they're looking at and give timelines and deadlines and objectives and goals as to what it is that the committee should be looking at, can be looking at, and give a report back to the council.
Councilwoman Durbin. Thank you, Councilwoman Tyler.
Some of that, what you said, the deadlines and all that, that's over time, right? That's not an initial definition. That's over time.
Doesn't have to be. In the beginning, when you set up, typically when you set up ad hoc committees, you have a long-range goal. In this particular situation, we're starting off learning what has been done or what is planned to be done, and what are the goals and objectives of those developments that are just in their initial stages that are in the surrounding areas. From that, I think that's where we can start looking at what may be some of our objectives, timelines, and goals that we can achieve. Right now, this whole area is under a development committee. So us coming in saying, yes, by this month we're going to have this and this, we can't. But I think that is part of our role in an ad hoc committee, is to come up with those types of guidelines.
Are there any further questions or comments from members of the council? If not, there has been a motion and support to create an ad hoc council committee on development. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, same sign. The motion carries 6-0. Next is discussion and vote on the ad hoc committee, council committee on climate change and the environment. This is an idea that was proposed by a village resident a meeting or two ago, and following that meeting, a number of residents contacted me and thought that this would be an excellent idea and actually volunteered to serve should we create such a committee. So this is a request to the council to create an ad hoc council committee on climate change and environment, and to ask the mayor to propose some members of this committee to the council at our November meeting. One of the people who volunteered in light of the past discussion has drafted a very simple mission statement for this ad hoc council committee. So we look for something to come back from Mayor White, assuming the council approves the creation of this committee. So is there a motion to create such a committee?
I'll move to.
Okay. Councilwoman Salt moves the motion to create the ad hoc council committee. Councilwoman Tyler supports that. Is there any discussion? Councilwoman Durbin.
What is this definition you were talking about?
Yes, there's a draft mission statement that has been shared. I'd be happy to provide that to council, certainly before the November meeting.
Shouldn't we hear it now?
Well, I think what we'd like to do is to, again, this is to create a committee to begin to address issues of local issues that might relate to climate change and the environment actions that the council can take. And we can work with that initial statement and work with the council to have that to review for the November meeting when the representatives, when the members of that committee are recommended.
What are you calling the initial statement?
A mission statement for the committee.
Oh.
Yeah. Are there, Councilman Measy?
I wonder whether you're calling this a council committee. I take it a committee composed of council members, yet it seems to me that what you're saying is that the initiative has come in large measure from members of the community. Rather than this being a council committee, wouldn't it make sense for it to be a committee like the Community Advisory Committee, a program committee with a council liaison to it, rather than a committee of council members as the development committee is?
I do think that that would be a good idea, and that if that's the, we can either amend the motion if we, to construct it that way.
I so amend the motion.
Okay. Is there support? Is there support for that?
I second.
Okay, great. And the maker of the motion, no problem with that, I assume?
Probably not.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Do I have to
Councilwoman
look?
Salt.
At the risk of repeating myself, I really strongly believe in community input and to cast widely, to have participants who aren't the same people who've participated in other things. It sounds like you're moving that direction, but I would also like maybe there to be a notice out that people who are interested can volunteer, and it's not just the people we already know are interested. There may be lots of other or very important or experienced other people, or maybe just interested people, and I would like them to have a chance and to know about this.
Other comments? Councilwoman Durbin?
Are we considering this a council committee or a community committee?
Well, it would be a council appointed, a council formed committee, the composition of which will be determined in part based upon the number of people, if there are people who wish to participate, that could be involved. Let me actually do something here, which is first to take a vote on amending the original motion, which was Councilman Measy's motion to form the committee in a certain way. Is there any further discussion about that? Councilwoman Tyler?
Yes, I agree with Michael, because I also agree with Martha, and we've talked about this many times. I think it is imperative that we include and pull from our resources in our community. That being said, I agree that we should change this from an ad hoc council committee to an ad hoc community committee on climate change with a liaison representative from the council, such as Michael said with the CAC, and as the position I hold as a liaison.
Okay.
And I think it will come across a lot smoother and also meet the objectives of bringing more people in the community involved in things that they like to do, that we need help in doing, because we cannot do everything.
Yes, Councilwoman Durbin.
Before we vote, then, could Councilman Measy restate what the motion is now?
Not sure how it restated in the exact words, but my motion would be that we establish Cheryl refers to it as a community committee on the environment, composed of members of the community with a council liaison, in much the same way as the Citizen Advisory Committee acts and as the Program Committee acts.
Okay, great. So, Mayor White.
So that we don't get confused talking to residents when we say community committee, I'm wondering if this should be called Advisory Committee on Climate Change and
Environment.
Environment, and
that
take
sounds
out the
reasonable.
word community. I'm afraid it's going to get confused with Community Advisory Committee. So I think the word advisory is important in there.
Okay, so let me see, Council, thank you, Mayor White. So, Councilman Measy, just for the purpose of the minute takers, let me restate the motion as I understand it. All right, thanks. The motion is to create an ad hoc advisory committee on climate change and the environment. One council liaison to that committee would be appointed by the council. We would widely broadcast the creation of this committee and seek participation from community members in the committee. Is there anything else that I missed?
Is that the motion
That's,
now?
yes, that's now the motion, as I understood it.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there support for that motion? Mayor White, thank you. Okay. Any further discussion on this?
Sure.
Councilwoman Tyler, supported. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call for the question. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, same sign. The motion carries 6-0. Next is a discussion and vote on the Community Advisory Committee appointments. Mayor White.
Yes, we have 3 residents that I am recommending be added to the Community Advisory Committee, and you all have copies of their statements of interest. The residents are Al Muller, Stephanie Clipper, and Prem Garg. And I would make a motion that we appoint these residents to that committee.
There's been a motion and support to appoint Muller, Clipper, and Garg to the Community Advisory Committee. Is there any discussion? Councilwoman Salt.
This came up last month, and I was concerned that there wasn't enough outreach. I made an effort to reach out to all the buildings that had not been represented, and we did get an expression of interest from a respected member of the community, and I think that was a successful effort. So I appreciate the patience of the additional month.
Thank you very much. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none. Oh, Councilwoman Tyler.
What does that put the total at? I know Joe had suggested or recommended that it not exceed 13, so where are we now? 13.
Yeah.
It's a lucky number.
Any further comments or suggestions? Okay, seeing none, call for the vote. All those in favor, raise your hand, please. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 6-0. We have no new business. Is there a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
So moved.
Councilman Measy, second. All those in favor, raise your hand, please. Thank you. 6-0.
Could I ask something? Somebody left a cell phone on a chair here. Is it anybody in this room? I suspect not. I think they have left.
Give it to
I'll give
Julian.
it to Julian.
Yeah.
Give it to Julian.